Welcome back to Nature Documentary for Sleep. If you enjoy these quiet journeys, leave a comment and consider liking and subscribing. Tonight, you're arriving on Martinique with Mount Pelée sitting above the port like an unbothered landmark. You walk the streets of Saint-Pierre after dark, past sugar warehouses and warm lamplight on wet stone. The trade wind brings a faint sulfur edge, and ash settles on windowsills in a thin, gritty line. You follow the sound up valley, where rockfalls click in the ravines and springs turn cloudy. Down in town, people sweep the dust and keep the schedules because routine is easier than revision. Up high, the crater steams and a new dome begins to rise, slow enough to look harmless. But when viscous magma plugs the vent, pressure stops escaping upward and starts searching for faster exits. So what happens, step by step, when that trapped gas and heat fail into the valleys aimed at the coast? You start by listening to the town the way you listen to a ship. At night, not the words, the creaks, the little betrayals in the background that say something heavy is shifting. A shutter clacks twice, then stops, like the wind has changed its mind. Somewhere near the cathedral, a dog barks at nothing, then retreats. And from the mountain, there is a soft, distant exhale, too steady to be thunder. In the morning, you expect the ash to be gone. You expect a clean rinse from the trade wind or a quick tropical shower. Instead, you wake to a second dusting, heavier, like flour left out overnight. It clings to the cuffs of trousers and the edges of bread and the eyelids of statues. People joke about it because jokes are cheaper than boats. A clerk outside a warehouse wipes his counter and says it is just the season for it. He says the mountain has moods, and this is only one of them. Then a bell rings at the harbor, not for church, but for navigation. The air has thickened enough that captains want sound more than sight. You walk down to the water, and the sea looks innocent in that practiced way. It shines, it laps, it offers the same old salt breath, but the sunlight is dulled, as if someone hung a gray curtain over the island. When you look back at Mount Pelée, the summit is missing, not hidden behind cloud, not artistically framed by mist, missing behind its own ash, rising in a column that cannot decide which direction to lean. By late afternoon, the first concrete escalation arrives like a minor inconvenience. A brief, sharp tremor runs through the stones under your feet. Not enough to topple anything, not enough for panic. Just enough to make glassware whisper against itself in a cupboard. People pause, then continue, because the body loves denial. A woman carrying laundry glances up, then lowers her eyes, faster than a prayer. The shopkeepers keep their doors open, because closed doors admit fear. And the mountain, behind all of it, keeps exhaling. You decide to walk toward the river mouths, because water is honest. It cannot pretend it is not being changed. The streets slope down toward channels that braid through Saint-Pierre like veins. In daylight, you can see the ash collecting in gutters, turning rainwater into gray paste. At the edge of town, the Rivière Roxelane runs darker than it should. It moves with a thicker sound, like fabric dragged across stone. You crouch and dip your fingers in. The water is not warm, but it is wrong. It feels slightly oily, slightly heavy, as if it carries ground-up secrets. A fisherman nearby holds up his net and shrugs. No fish today, he says, and yesterday there were fewer. He blames luck, then blames the moon, then finally glances toward Pelée. His shrug changes shape, from casual to cautious. By evening, a new development arrives on the wind. A faint rattling begins, like dry leaves shaken in a box. You realize it is not leaves, it is ash, landing grain by grain on rooftops, on palm fronds, on the hard brim of your hat. The sound is soft, but it is everywhere. It settles into the folds of clothing, the corners of eyelids, the hinges of doors. Breathing feels a little thicker, like the air has been mixed with chalk. In a cafe, men argue about whether this counts as danger. One says the mountain always smokes, and always. Another says it is a spectacle, and tourists will come. A third says nothing, and rubs his chest once, absent-minded and tight. The next morning, you hear about a small eruption column, as if it were gossip. A dark puff rose above the summit, someone says, then faded. It was quick enough to dismiss, and that is the problem. Quick events teach people to wait out the next one. You walk to a higher street, where you can see the mountain's upper slopes. The vegetation up there looks bruised, as if someone rubbed soot into the green. A thin plume trails off the crater, pale at first, then darker at its base. Now and then, it pulses, not rising smoothly, but surging like a throat clearing. You find yourself counting the seconds between pulses, like a person with a bad habit. As afternoon arrives, carts move through town with barrels of water. The wells have started to taste odd, people say. Not poison, not exactly, just metallic and sour around the edges. You watch a child spit and wipe his tongue on his sleeve. His mother scolds him, then takes a sip and does not scold again. This is how danger enters a place, not with a roar, but with small negotiations of comfort. That night, you make your first real decision. You can stay near the harbor, where ships mean options. Or you can go up valley, where the sounds are changing. You choose the valley because you want to see the mechanism, not the myth. You follow a road that climbs past gardens and banana trees. The air cools as you rise, but it also sharpens, threaded with sulfur. Somewhere above, rocks click and skitter down a ravine. It sounds like someone dropping coins onto stone, again and again. You stop and listen. The clicking becomes a brief cascade, then stops, a pause, then another. It is not random. It is the mountain adjusting its grip on itself. In the dim light, you notice fresh scars on the hillside, small slips, thin lines where soil has given up and slid. They look like scratches, but you know scratches become wounds. You pass a spring that should run clear. Tonight, it runs cloudy, the water milked with fine ash. A man stands beside it with a tin cup. He watches you approach, then pours the cup out onto the ground. He does not drink. He is not dramatic about it, which makes it worse. He just makes a quiet choice and leaves. You continue upward until the road narrows and the vegetation thickens. Tree ferns crowd close, their fronds glossy with moisture and grit. The air is damp and the ash sticks to it, turning mist into something you can almost see. Your breath feels loud in your own ears. Then you hear something new, low and constant. It is not a rockfall, it is a murmur, like a distant crowd or a pot beginning to boil. You reach a vantage point where you can see the channel below. The river is running faster than it should for this season. It carries not just water, but gray silt, as if the mountain is being dissolved upstream. Stones bump and knock under the surface, audible through the flow. It sounds like the riverbed is moving, because it is. You watch a branch sweep by, then a chunk of bark, then something heavier. A small log tumbles end over end, coated in mud. The current grabs it with eager hands and drags it away. This is the mountain's nervous system sending signals. And tonight, the signals are getting louder. When you return to Saint-Pierre, the town is still doing business. A ship is unloading, and men roll barrels down planks, steady and practiced. The harbor smells of sugar and tar, and above that, the faint, sour note of sulfur. You see ash on the shoulders of dock workers like dandruff. No one stops, because stopping is admitting the timeline has changed. At the prefecture, there are murmured meetings. You catch fragments as you pass. Words like precaution and rumor, and do not alarm the public. A printer runs off notices about staying calm. The paper itself is dusted, as if the mountain has already signed it. Another concrete development arrives before midnight. A brief rain shower sweeps through, warm and quick. You expect it to clear the air. Instead, it turns the ash into paste and the streets into slick gray slurry. In the gutters, it piles up like cement. Horses slip, then recover, snorting in confusion. Children laugh and throw handfuls until an adult snaps at them too sharply. The laughter stops because even children can hear fear when it changes pitch. In the morning, you go back to the rivers because they have more truth to offer. The Rivière Blanche is a name that feels like irony now. You follow its course, stepping around wet ash that clings to your boots. The channel is cutting at its banks, widening in places where it used to stay polite. It carries a gray load, and the water seems to pulse. Cool, then strangely warm, as if a hidden kettle is being dipped into the flow. You crouch again and feel it with your fingertips. The warmth is subtle, but it is real. Upstream, something is heating the mountain's blood. You notice the silence of animals. No bird song in the trees near the water. No frogs. Even insects seem quieter, as if they have taken a vote and decided to leave. A plantation worker passes you with a bundle of tools. He tells you the river rose in the night, not from rain, from something else. He gestures vaguely uphill, not wanting to name it. The cause and effect is simple and brutal. Ash and loose rock are filling the channels. Heat is changing the water. The river is turning from a drain into a conveyor belt of mud, and every valley here points like an arrow toward the coast. By midday, the first minor lahar arrives with the casual cruelty of a practical joke. A muddy surge comes down a tributary and spreads over a low bridge. Not a wall of death, not yet, just enough to smear the stones with gray paste and carry branches into the road. A cart tries to cross, wheels sinking slightly. Men shout and push and manage to drag it free. They laugh afterward, a forced sound. They call it inconvenience, but you watch the bridge and you understand the message. Evacuation routes do not fail dramatically at first. They fail a little, then a little more until the day you need them, and they are gone. A new report moves through town by evening. Someone claims there is water collecting near the summit, a pond, maybe a small lake, in a place that should not hold water. You hear different versions, told with different levels of confidence. But the idea lands in your mind and stays there. Water trapped high on a volcano is not a scenic detail. It is a loaded weapon with a wet fuse, because when water meets heat underground, it expands violently. Not gently, not gradually. It flashes into steam and punches rock apart like brittle bread. You stand on a balcony near the harbor and watch the mountain in the twilight. The plume is thicker now, its base darker, rising into a sky that cannot decide on night. The whole summit looks smudged, like charcoal rubbed into paper. You see faint lightning flicker within the ash cloud. Not a storm from the ocean, a storm made from rock dust, charged by friction and chaos. It is beautiful in the way a fire is beautiful, which is to say, it does not care if you are watching. Another decision point forms, quiet but sharp. You can accept the town's rhythm and wait for official instructions, or you can climb higher toward the crater zone to see if the reports are true. You choose to climb because waiting is comfortable, and comfort is a trap. At dawn, you start up the trail that leads into the higher forest. The air is cooler, but it carries a sour bite like struck matches. Moisture beads on leaves, and ash freckles every surface. Your boots press into soft ground that feels newly unsettled. The mountain is not just smoking, it is sweating. As you climb, the vegetation thins in patches. Some plants look scorched at the edges, not burned, but dried by hot breath. The trail passes areas where steam rises directly from the soil. It curls around roots and stones, disappearing into the humid air. You pause beside a fumarole, a vent where gas escapes. It hisses like a kettle left on too long. The smell is sulfur, sharp and unmistakable. Your eyes sting, and you step away, blinking. This is the mountain breathing through cracks, because its main throat is beginning to clog. Higher up, cloud closes around you. Not dramatic cloud, not cinematic fog, just wet gray presence, beating on your hair and eyelashes. Visibility shrinks, and sound becomes more important. You hear dripping and distant rumbling, and the occasional clatter of rockfall. Every now and then, there is a deeper note, a low vibration, like a far-off drum. It is tremor, the volcano's internal machinery turning. You reach a place where the ground is stained in violent colors. Sulfur yellow, rust red, and a pale green that looks sickly in the mist. Rocks here are not clean stone. They are coated in minerals left by gas, painted by chemistry. You see small rivulets of warm water trickling over the stains. They carry tiny bubbles, like the mountain is exhaling underwater. Then you smell something stronger, and you know you are near the summit basin. The reports of water were not just rumor. You come to the edge of a shallow depression where water has collected. It is not a clear lake. It is a churning, cloudy pond, its surface trembling with constant agitation. Every few moments, a bubble breaks through and releases a breath of steam. The water is stained, and the rocks around it are bleached and crusted. It looks like a cauldron someone forgot to turn off. You do not step closer than you have to because the edges are unstable, and the ground here is sometimes just ash pretending to be solid. A new concrete development arrives with a sound like a gunshot in the fog, a phreatic burst, a steam explosion somewhere beyond your view. The ground jolts and a rush of air hits your face. A moment later, gravel rains down through the canopy. Small stones tick against leaves and thud into soft earth. You flinch, then go still, listening. The explosion was not lava. It was water flashing into steam, expanding fast enough to shatter rock. It is the mountain clearing its throat by punching itself in the mouth. You wait and the fog thickens, and ash begins to fall again. Not heavy, not yet, just persistent, a fine gray whisper settling on your sleeves. You realize how quickly visibility can vanish here. 1 minute, you have a path. The next minute, the path is a rumor you tell yourself to stay calm. The fog presses in, and the mountain erases distance like it is embarrassed to be seen. You take one careful step, then another, and the ground answers with a soft give. It is not mud exactly. It is ash, wet ash, compacted into something that pretends it is soil. You test it with your boot, and it shivers as if it is floating. Congratulations, you have found the part of the volcano that is quietly trying to become quicksand. You keep your weight low, and you follow the sound instead of the view. To your left, the crater pond churns with a faint, constant agitation. To your right, fumaroles hiss and spit, each one a small mouth tasting the air. The hissing is not random. It rises and falls, like the mountain is practicing a breath it will need later. You wait for another burst, because once you have heard a steam explosion, you start expecting it. The expectation is the worst part. It turns every silence into a loaded pause. A tremor comes through the ground, subtle but long, like someone dragging a heavy table above your ceiling. The pond responds with a shudder. A ring of ripples races outward, and the surface breaks in a few ugly blisters. Steam lifts off in a low sheet, hugging the water as if it is afraid of the sky. This is the pressure game. Heat is rising beneath you, and water is collecting above it. The volcano is not a fireplace with a chimney. It is a sealed kettle with hairline cracks. When pressure builds in magma, it is not just molten rock, it is gas trapped inside, trying to expand. Water in the wrong place makes that expansion sudden. The moment liquid becomes steam, it demands space, and it takes it violently. That is why these bursts sound like gunshots. That is why the crater rim keeps shedding gravel, even when nothing seems to be happening. You back away from the pond because you are not here to be heroic. You are here to learn, and learning requires staying alive long enough to remember. As you retreat, the ashfall thickens and the fog turns grainy. Your eyelashes catch grit, and every blink feels like sandpaper. Breathing becomes a conscious act. In through the nose, slow, shallow, like you are trying not to wake someone sleeping nearby. The someone sleeping nearby is the volcano. A second burst cracks somewhere upslope. The sound arrives first, then the impact. A puff of darker ash surges through the fog, and you feel tiny particles pepper your cheeks. The air warms briefly, like a door opening to a boiler room, then closing again. You do not need to see the source to understand the message. The crater is unstable, and instability has a direction. Gravity does not care about your plans, or the town schedule, or the comforting idea that disasters announce themselves politely. You turn downhill. The descent is slower than the climb because your body knows what happens if you slip. Every step tests the surface, and every test costs time. Time is the one resource a volcano always has more of than you. As you drop into thicker vegetation, the air becomes wetter and the sulfur smell dulls slightly. You can hear water again, somewhere below, running fast. The river is louder than it was yesterday. It has the impatient tone of something carrying too much. You reach a point where the trail crosses a small gully. Yesterday it was a trickle. Today it is a gray ribbon of slurry, cutting through the plants like a knife. It is not deep, but it is dense. Pebbles roll in it with a clacking sound, like teeth. You watch a fist-sized stone tumble along the bottom, pushed by a flow that looks too small to move it. That is the thing about lahars in their early stages. They start as dirty water and end as wet concrete with momentum. You step back and look uphill through the dripping leaves. The mountain is invisible, but you can feel it in the way the forest holds its breath. You keep descending, and the ash fall fades to a light sprinkle. By the time you reach the lower roads, people are still moving about. They look up when they hear distant booms, then go back to their errands. That is not stupidity. That is the human talent for making the unbearable ordinary. In St. Pierre, ash has already become routine maintenance. Shopkeepers sweep it from their thresholds like it is seasonal pollen. Laundry hangs again, as if clean cloth can negotiate with chemistry. A priest wipes ash from the church steps, and his gesture is practical, not symbolic. In the harbor, ships still sit at anchor, patient and heavy. Their masts disappear into a sky that has lost its bright blue confidence. You walk along the waterfront, and the sea air tastes wrong. Not just salt. There is a mineral edge, like coins held too long in the mouth. A sailor spits over the side and watches the spit land thickly. He frowns, then laughs once, like he is trying to insult the mountain into behaving. The laughter dies quickly. You find an official notice posted near a corner. It says, "There is no cause for alarm." It says the situation is being monitored. It says life should continue as normal. The ash has already stuck to the paper, turning the ink slightly blurry. Even the reassurance looks tired. You hear people talking about the crater pond now, openly. Some say it is a sign the volcano is cooling. Water means cool, they reason, like a bath. Others say the water is boiling. They argue about it like it is a political rumor. This is the dangerous comfort of partial information. A crater lake sounds like a feature. It sounds stable, scenic, something you put on a postcard. What it can be is a cap, a lid of water and debris sitting over heat that is rising. The wrong kind of lid does not prevent an explosion. It sharpens it. In the evening, a deeper tremor starts, and it does not stop quickly. It is not a single jolt. It is a vibration that slides into the bones of buildings. Glass rattles in cabinets, and people pause mid-conversation. You feel it through the soles of your feet, as if the street itself is humming. Some call it an earthquake, because that is the familiar word. But this is tremor. This is the volcano's plumbing system shaking as fluids move. Magma is not politely molten. It is a thick, sticky mix of melt and crystals and gas. And this magma at Pelée is the kind that resists flow. It is viscous, like cold syrup, like traffic in the rain. When it rises, it does not pour out easily. It plugs, it piles up, it forms a dome, a swelling mass that blocks the vent like a cork. A plugged volcano does not relax. It loads. You stand at a street corner and watch ash drift past a lamplight. Each grain is small, but together they make a weather of rock. You imagine the dome forming up there, unseen behind cloud, not a dramatic mountain of glowing lava, more like a slow extrusion, a pasty, stubborn push, like toothpaste forced through a hole, except the toothpaste is hot rock, and the tube is the earth, and inside that rock, gas is trapped. Gas is impatient. Gas wants to expand, and it does not care what it breaks to do it. That night, the sky over the summit glows faintly, a dull redness behind the clouds. It is easy to misread. A glow can look like a contained fire, a manageable thing. In reality, it can mean the dome surface is hot enough to radiate through ash and mist. It can mean fresh magma is close to the air, close enough to be thinking about escape. You try to sleep because you are still human, and even dread needs rest. But your sleep is shallow. Every small sound pulls you up. A cartwheel on stone, a distant shout, the soft hiss of ash against shutters, and always, faintly, the low machinery of the mountain, like a ship engine, idling beyond the harbor. In the early hours, rain returns. It falls warm and fast, a tropical sheet. For a moment, you almost feel relief. Water means clearing. You tell yourself, like washing a chalkboard. But the rain hits ash and turns it into paste again. Gutters clog, drainage channels fill, the streets become slick. And uphill, water seeps into ash deposits and loose debris, loading them with weight. Water does not just wash a volcano, it primes it. By dawn, the rivers run higher again. You go back to the Rivière Blanche because you have learned the pattern. The river is the volcano's report card. And this morning, the grades are getting worse. The water carries chunks now, not just silt, small branches, stones, a broken piece of fencing. The flow makes a grinding sound, like a mill turning. You stand on a bank and watch the current attack its own edges. It undercuts the side, and a slab of wet ash collapses into the stream. The river eats it immediately. That is how channels widen before a disaster, not with one big cut, but with constant hungry bites. A man comes down to the bank with a bucket. He looks at the water, hesitates, and turns away. He does not fill the bucket. He does not say anything. That silent decision spreads faster than any official notice. In town, the market opens anyway. Fruit is laid out, dusted with ash. Women wipe it with cloths, then sell it. People buy it, then wash it at home, because they want breakfast to be normal. Normal is a drug. It dulls the edges of reality, and it is widely available. By mid-morning, the ashfall intensifies again. It is heavier, with a coarser texture. You can hear it clearly on roofs now, a steady patter like dry rain. The sky is no longer a sky. It is a ceiling, and the mountain plume is merging with cloud into a single, dark mass. The darkness changes the mood of the sea. The harbor looks like it is under an eclipse. Ships blow their horns more often, not because they are lost, but because visibility is unreliable. Sound becomes the way you measure distance. You hear a ship horn, then count the seconds to see how far it is. You hear the horn again, and the count is shorter. Everything feels closer, even danger. In the afternoon, lightning flickers again above Pelée. It is not dramatic bolts to the sea. It is small branching flashes within the ash, like nerves firing. Volcanic lightning is friction made visible. Ash particles rub, charge builds, and the cloud becomes its own storm. It is the atmosphere reacting to pulverized rock. It is geology learning to do weather. People gather on balconies to watch it. They point like it is fireworks. You watch their faces, lit by brief flashes. Some are impressed, some are uneasy. A few look offended, as if the mountain is being rude. You look back up the valley roads, and you imagine what they look like now. Slick with paste, cut by small flows, bridges smeared. And if you had to leave quickly, in panic, with carts and children and livestock, you would funnel into those same roads. You would trust them, and that trust would be misplaced. You make another decision. You go to the waterfront and study the ships. Not the cargo, the crews. Are they staying? Are they preparing to leave? A captain stands on a deck and argues with a harbor official. You cannot hear every word, but you catch the tone. The captain wants permission to sail. The official wants to avoid looking alarmist. Schedules argue with geology. Geology does not argue back. It just continues. That evening, you hear of more tremors felt in villages farther along the coast. The volcano is not just a local nuisance anymore. Its influence is spreading like an odor that will not stay in one room. You walk to a higher point in town where you can see the mountain slope when the cloud thins. For a moment, the upper flank appears. It looks darker than before, dusted heavily, and then you see something that makes your stomach tighten. A bulge near the summit line, subtle but real. Not a new peak, not a clean shape, more like a swelling, a thickening, a place where the mountain seems to be pushing against its own skin. That is the dome, or the beginning of it at least, a viscous plug forming where you wish there was an open chimney. You watch it until fog eats it again. Then you listen. A distant rumble rolls down the slopes, longer than thunder. It fades, then returns, like the mountain is dragging something heavy inside itself. You think of pressure building behind that plug, gas trying to escape, heat trapped under rock that is too sticky to let it pass, and you think of the valleys, because a volcano like this does not always explode upward like a movie. Sometimes it fails sideways when the pressure finds a weak seam. Sometimes it unzips its own flank, and the thing that comes out is not lava you can run from. It is a density current, hot gas and ash and rock fragments moving like an avalanche. With lungs, it hugs the ground. It accelerates. It follows valleys like rails. It does not pause at city limits. You try to tell someone, not dramatically, not like a prophet, like a person pointing out a fire hazard. You speak to a shop owner you have seen every day. You mention the rivers rising without rain. You mention the crater pond. You mention the dome and what a plug means. He listens, then shrugs with tired politeness. He says the authorities would tell them if it were serious. He says there are elections coming, and people are already tense. He says panic would ruin business. He says St. Pierre is the Paris of the Antilles, and Paris does not run from smoke. You nod, because arguing is useless. Belief is not a door you can force open. It opens when the person is ready to lose what is behind it. That night, ash falls steadily, and the tremor continues, a low background vibration. In your room, you set your boots where you can reach them quickly. You put water within arm's reach because your throat feels scraped raw. You keep your clothes laid out because you do not want to dress while the world ends. Congratulations, you have become the kind of person who sleeps in their plans. Outside, the city tries to maintain its rituals. A few lights in cafes, footsteps on stone, a distant laugh that sounds practiced. The mountain does not join in. Near midnight, a louder boom echoes and windows rattle. Somewhere, someone screams, then stops, then the sound of running feet, then silence again. In the morning, you hear the story. A small ash surge, they say, somewhere up valley. Nothing major, just a blast that pushed hot gas and ash through a channel, startling a few workers. No official confirmation, just the kind of rumor that fades if you do not repeat it. You decide to go find evidence because rumors are slippery. The road out of town is coated in gray paste again. Cart tracks form grooves like shallow canals. As you climb toward the plantations, the air warms slightly, not from sun, but from breath rising out of gullies. You reach a small bridge where yesterday the water only smeared. Today, mud has piled against the upstream side. Branches are stuck in it like bones. The bridge has become a sieve, catching debris. Water forces its way through, brown and foaming. A man stands there, staring. He says, the river came fast in the night. He says, it sounded like a herd of animals. He says, it carried rocks the size of barrels. His hands shake slightly as he talks, as if the sound is still in them. You follow the channel a little farther. The banks are freshly gouged. Trees lean at strange angles, their roots exposed. The river has shifted, not gradually, but decisively. It has chosen a new line because the old one was clogged. This is how the landscape reorganizes before it destroys you. It quietly redraws the map, and humans keep using the old map because it is printed and familiar. By midday, heat haze shimmers above parts of the channel. You do not see open steam, but you see distortion like air above a road in summer. That means the flow is warm in places, or the ground beneath it is. Either way, it is another piece of the same puzzle. Water is interacting with heat, and the volcano is not finished with either. Back in town, officials hold meetings. You see men in clean suits with ash on their shoulders. You see their shoes leaving gray prints on polished floors. They speak in careful tones. They mention order. They mention commerce. They mention not frightening the population. No one mentions that the evacuation roads are degrading daily. No one mentions that a plugged dome system can fail without giving you a polite countdown. That evening, you go again to a high street to watch the summit. The plume is thicker and it rises more forcefully now. It does not drift like smoke. It punches upward, then spreads into a dark cap. ash falls farther down the coast. People in villages miles away begin sweeping too. The mountain is making sure everyone participates. A new sound joins the night, a continuous low roar, not a boom, not a crack, a sustained noise like wind through a tunnel. You realize it is coming from the direction of the crater. That could be gas venting around the plug, or it could be rockfall from the dome growing and collapsing in small chunks. Either way, it means motion. And motion at the summit means instability that will eventually travel downslope. You sleep badly again, and in the early hours, you dream of rivers, not water rivers, rivers of ash, moving like fog, but hot enough to erase stone. You wake with your throat burning, and you taste grit on your teeth. Morning arrives with a strange calm. The sea is flat. The air is heavy. The plume above Pelée looks like a permanent stain now, and people treat that stain as if it is part of the sky. Children walk to school with cloths over their mouths. You watch the teachers pretend the cloths are about hygiene, not survival. You watch the parents pretend the mountain is simply in a bad mood, not actively rearranging the island. And you watch the ash settle onto shoulders like a new uniform issued by geology. By mid-morning, the schoolyard sounds are muted. Not because the children are quieter, because the air itself has become a filter thick enough to swallow sharp noises. You walk toward the river again because the river does not pretend. It drags the truth downhill, whether anyone is listening or not. At the edge of the rocks lane, the water is now the color of weak coffee. It carries a skin of pale foam that clings to rocks like spit. You find a fish, belly up in a shallow eddy, and you do not feel surprised. The surprise was yesterday, when anything was still alive in here. A woman kneels at the bank with a bucket, then stops. She stares at the water, and the bucket hangs from her hand like a question. She turns away without filling it, and you feel the town's confidence crack a millimeter. Not a panic, not yet. Just a quiet subtraction of options. Up valley, you hear a sound like distant fabric tearing. It comes, then fades, then comes again. It is not wind. It is rock breaking and sliding somewhere high, where the dome is growing in the fog. You start walking uphill again because you want evidence that cannot be shrugged off. The road is worse today. The ash paste has dried into ridges, and the ridges grab your boots. Every cart that passes makes grooves, and the grooves become channels for the next rain. You pass a ditch where gray water trickles, and it has already started cutting deeper. This is the part people miss. The volcano is not only building pressure in its throat, it is sabotaging the exits. As you climb, the air warms in pulses, not sunlight, not humidity. Warm breaths rising out of gullies like the mountain is exhaling through its pores. You reach a plantation road where men stand in a loose group, staring uphill. Their faces are dusted, their hair turned dull. One of them points to a slope that used to be green. Now it looks singed, as if someone passed a giant candle too close. You follow their gaze and you see something slide. A thin sheet of ash and soil peels off a hillside and oozes into a ditch. It moves slowly, like syrup, but it does not stop. Gravity is patient, and it always collects its debts. One man says, it is nothing. Another says he heard the mountain booming before dawn. A third man just keeps looking at the ditch, watching the slow ooze like he has finally met the future. You keep going. The forest begins to feel wrong. Not dead, not yet, just distracted, as if every leaf is listening for the next tremor. Then you hear it, a sustained low vibration, a tremor that is not a single shake. It is a continuous purr under your feet, like a machine running behind a wall. You stop walking because your body wants to know if this is safe. The ground does not crack, no trees fall, nothing dramatic happens. And that is the most dangerous kind of calm. A volcano can move enormous things without giving you a cinematic cue. It can shift fluids through rock like someone pushing thick soup through a straw. That movement makes tremor. It is the sound of pressure relocating, and pressure, once it relocates, likes to find a shortcut. You turn back toward town before the fog thickens, not because you are done, because you do not want to be up here when the next steam burst decides to aim at the trail. On the way down, you pass a gutter where rainwater has pooled. The puddle is not clear. It is a thin, gray milk, and it leaves a ring of ash like a bathtub stain. You imagine thousands of little puddles like this, soaking into ash deposits on steep slopes. Water adds weight. Water adds slipperiness. Water adds the one ingredient that turns loose volcanic debris into moving cement. Congratulations, you live in a place where the weather can become a weapon. Back in Saint-Pierre, the harbor still works. Barrels still roll. Men still shout. The sea still pretends it is not involved. But you see more people looking at the ships than looking at each other. You see families lingering near the waterfront longer than they need to. They do not say evacuation. They say errands. They say visiting someone. They say the air is better by the sea, all of which can be true, and also a lie they tell themselves to stay near an exit. At the prefecture, more notices appear. They reassure. They instruct people to stay calm. They remind everyone that panic is more dangerous than ash. It is a beautiful sentence if you ignore the mountain. You stand near one of the notices and watch the paper flutter. Ash has glued parts of it to the wall, like the volcano is editing the message. A man reads it out loud to his friend, as if spoken words make it official. His friend nods, then coughs, then nods again. Stubbornly, you walk away because you can feel the real decision forming. The mountain is escalating. The roads are degrading. And the town is choosing routine, because routine is familiar, and familiarity feels like safety. In the afternoon, a messenger arrives from up coast. He brings news that ash is falling farther away now. People in villages who cannot even see Pelée are sweeping their steps. The messenger laughs when he says it, like it is a shared inconvenience. But his laugh has a brittle edge, because inconvenience does not travel this far unless something is changing. Toward evening, the sky over the mountain turns a darker gray. Not night, not storm, just a thickening ceiling, like the island is being fitted with a lid. You go to your high street again because you have made a habit of watching. Through a brief tear in the cloud, the summit appears, and you see the dome more clearly now. It is not a clean, rounded mound. It is jagged, like broken teeth pushing up through gum. It looks wet and solid at the same time. That is fresh lava cooling into rock as it emerges. And because it is viscous, it stacks instead of flowing. It is building a plug, and it is also building a wall that pressure will lean against until something gives. The tear in the cloud closes, the summit disappears, and you are left staring at an ordinary slope as if you imagined it. This is how people convince themselves nothing is happening. The mountain hides the evidence behind weather. A low boom rolls down the valley, then another. They are spaced irregularly, like someone dropping heavy crates in a warehouse. Each boom is followed by a few seconds of silence. Then the faint sound of gravel sliding. The dome is shedding pieces. Small collapses, little avalanches of hot rock fragments, breaking apart and feeding the slopes with fresh debris. It is not the main disaster. It is the mountain stocking its pantry. That night, you do what you have been doing. You sleep in your clothes. You keep your boots close. You keep water near, even though the water tastes wrong. You try to rest, and your rest is thin. Sometime after midnight, you hear shouting in the street. Not a fight, a calling out, urgent and confused. You open your shutters, and ash immediately dusts the sill. Like it was waiting, a man runs past, and his face is streaked with sweat that has turned gray. He points uphill and yells something you cannot fully catch. Then you hear it, a sound like rushing water, but deeper, not the river. Something heavier, carrying stones. It grows louder, then fades, then returns. The sound is moving through channels. You head toward the edge of town, toward where the valleys funnel down. You keep to the sides of streets because you have learned to distrust open spaces when visibility is bad. The air is thick and lamplight looks smeared. When you reach a bridge, you see people gathered, holding lanterns low. The river below is high and ugly. It is not just water. It is a rolling slurry with chunks in it, knocking together. Every few seconds, something solid hits the bridge supports with a dull thud. Branches, logs, maybe parts of fences. The flow has weight, and weight has momentum, and momentum does not care about masonry. Someone says Alahar came down a tributary higher up. They use the local words for mud flow, but the meaning is the same. The mountain has sent another test run. Not a full strike, a warning shot. You watch the slurry surge around a bend, and you imagine it multiplied. You imagine it with more debris, more volume, more speed. You imagine it arriving in daylight when people are on the roads and in the market. Then you imagine it arriving at night when no one sees it until it is already under them. You step back and you hear another boom from the mountain. This one feels heavier. And a moment later, the ash fall thickens. Not a gentle sprinkle, a proper fall, like dry snow. Lantern light becomes a small circle in a large gray world. People start to cough more openly now. The polite coughing is gone, the kind where you pretend it is nothing. This is the coughing of lungs getting scraped. This is the body negotiating with particles it cannot digest. You go back toward the harbor, because the harbor is the only wide open place that still feels like an option. But when you reach it, you find something that turns your stomach. The water near shore is littered with dead fish. Not one, not a few. A scatter of silver bodies, rocking in the gentle swell. The sea has begun receiving the mountain's runoff. Ash in rivers, mud in channels, chemistry in springs. And now the coast itself is being edited. A sailor stands nearby, staring. He says the fish came in with the tide, already dead. He says the sea smells off. He says it is like the water has been bruised. You nod because you know what volcanic gases can do. Sulfur compounds can acidify water. Carbon dioxide can collect low in depressions, invisible and heavy. These are not dramatic villains. They are quiet suffocators. They turn familiar places into traps. By morning, the town wakes to a new layer of ash, thicker than any before. It lies on rooftops like a heavy blanket. It fills the grooves of cobblestones. It softens edges. It makes everything look older, abandoned, like a city in a photograph after a fire. People move slower, not because they are finally afraid, because ash is work. It clogs hinges. It fills nostrils. It makes every step slightly uncertain. Even denial has to sweep. At the market, fewer stalls open. The fruit looks tired, dusted, resigned. A butcher wipes his cutting board twice as often. He mutters about the mountain ruining business, not about the mountain killing people. Still not that. You walk toward the government buildings again because you want to see if anyone is changing course. You find officials standing in a group, their faces serious in a way that still tries to look composed. They talk about keeping order. They talk about preventing looting, as if the main threat is human. They talk about the election. The election feels obscene now, like arguing about curtains while the house fills with smoke. A rumor moves through the crowd. There was a deadly event at a plantation. A big one. Not just mud on a bridge. People killed. The rumor grows teeth as it spreads. Different numbers, different details, but the core stays. The mountain struck, and it struck hard enough to leave bodies. This is the moment you have been waiting for, and you hate it, because evidence means someone paid for your certainty. You push toward the road leading to the plantation district. You find a man riding in on a cart, his face slack with exhaustion. His clothes are stained with gray mud up to the thighs. He looks like he has been wading through wet cement. You ask him what happened, and he does not answer at first. He just swallows, like he has to force words past grit. Then he says, the river came down like a wall, not a flood, a mass. Hot, he says. Hot enough that steam rose from it, hot enough that it burned. He says it hit the workers before they could run. He says it filled buildings, knocked down walls, carried equipment away like toys. He says people disappeared into it. He does not say drown. He says buried. Alahar, a volcanic mudflow, ash and rock and water mixed into something that moves like liquid but hits like concrete. This is what happens when loose deposits on steep slopes get saturated. Then, the release can be triggered by rain, or by an eruption pulse, or by a collapse up high. The cause can vary. The result does not. A valley becomes a delivery system. You stand there with the man's words settling into you. This is the decisive warning. This is Pelée proving the valleys are already weaponized. You look back towards Pierre, and you see the town framed by the coast, neat and bright in its own imagination. And behind it, the mountain's plume continues, indifferent. You feel the urge to shout, to grab people by the shoulders, to point uphill until they see what you see. But you also know what happens when you do that. They call you alarmist, they call you dramatic, they call you dangerous to commerce, because humans prefer a familiar threat to an unfamiliar truth. You return to town anyway, carrying the story like contraband. You tell a dock worker, you tell a shop owner, you tell a woman sweeping her steps. Some listen, some shrug. One man says it happened far away. He says Pierre is protected by the way the slopes are shaped. He says the mountain would send things down the other side. He says the wind is blowing the wrong way for danger. He says a lot of things that sound like safety. You look at the map in your head. You see the valleys pointing at the town. You see the channels you have been watching grow wider and meaner. You see how close the plantations are. Not far at all, just up the same system. You nod slowly, because arguing about geometry with someone who wants comfort is like arguing with a lullaby. It does not matter how correct you are. The song is already playing. In the afternoon, more ash falls, and the light goes sickly. The sun becomes a pale disk, like it is shining through dirty cloth. People start wearing cloths over their mouths more consistently now, not as a precaution, as a necessity. You hear more coughing. You hear it in houses, behind shutters. You hear it in the street, more frequent, more wet. Ash is not just dirt. It is tiny shards of rock and glass. It scratches lungs and it does not dissolve. Breathing becomes work. Work becomes fatigue. Fatigue becomes poor decisions. The volcano is not only threatening with heat, it is degrading the town's ability to respond. Near dusk, you feel another tremor, longer this time. It rolls through the ground like a slow wave, and in the distance you hear a sound that makes your spine tighten. A deeper roar, continuous, as if something has opened, gas venting harder, or a partial collapse at the summit. You cannot see. The plume has become its own weather system, but you can hear enough to know the machine is accelerating. You walk to the harbor again, and you see more ships preparing, not fleeing, preparing, ropes checked, cargo shifted, men talking in sharper tones. A captain stands with a telescope aimed at the mountain. He lowers it and wipes ash from the lens, annoyed. Annoyance is a strange emotion to feel toward a volcano, but it is human. You consider boarding a ship. You consider leaving tonight. You imagine the relief of putting water between you and the mountain. Then you imagine the town at dawn, still in denial, still sleeping under ash. You stay, not because you are brave, because you are stubborn, and because you want to see what the mountain is building toward. And because part of you believes that if you witness it clearly enough, you can translate it into warning. That is a lie you tell yourself to make staying feel useful. Night falls early now because the sky is heavy. Street lamps glow like small trapped moons. Ash drifts through their light in endless slow motion. In the distance, toward the base of the mountain, you see occasional flickers, not lightning this time. A dull redness, brief, as if the cloud ceiling is lit from below. That can be incandescent fragments rolling. It can be hot rock from dome collapses. It can be small eruptions at the vent. Either way, it means heat is reaching the surface more often, and surface activity means the system is not calming. It is transitioning. Sometime in the night, you hear church bells, not a service. An alarm. The sound rings out, then stutters, as if the person pulling the rope is unsure if they are allowed. Then the bells stop. The town tries to decide if it is time to become a different kind of town. A town that runs. A town that admits it might die. By morning, you hear that some people have left, not in a mass exodus, just a trickle. Families moving along the coast toward safer towns, a few taking boats. It is not enough to change the mood, but it is enough to change the soundscape. You notice fewer footsteps in certain streets. You notice shutters staying closed longer. You notice the small economy of gossip shifting from annoyance to fear. The mountain has finally become the main topic at breakfast. You walk to the edge of town where you can see up the valleys. The slopes are veiled, but you can make out the broad shapes. You see fresh pale scars where slides have occurred. You see darker streaks where wet debris has run. The valleys look like arteries, and you cannot stop thinking about what arteries do when the heart spasms. You hear another report from the summit. The crater pond has changed. Someone says, it is larger, it is more agitated. Another person says, it drained. Another says, it overflowed. The details are inconsistent, but the instability is consistent. Water up there is not stable, and that means pressure is interacting with it. Phreatic bursts, steam explosions can escalate quickly, and if magma is rising under that water, then the bursts can become something else, not just steam. A blast that fragments magma into ash and sends it outward. You stand in a street and watch ash drift down. Each grain is small. Together they are a message. The mountain is grinding itself into powder, and that powder is going somewhere. It is going into rivers, into lungs, onto roofs, into gutters. It is loading the island like a shelf that is slowly sagging. Around midday, a new event hits close enough to break through denial. A sudden ash surge sweeps down one of the nearer ravines. Not into the town's center, but close enough that people at the outskirts feel a hot wind. They smell sulfur stronger. They see a darker cloud race low along the ground for a moment, then dissipate. It is brief, it is terrifying. It is also easy to rationalize because it did not reach the main streets. That is the curse of near misses. They teach you the wrong lesson. They teach you that the mountain will stop short. You know better. You have read enough landscapes to know that a system testing its pathways is not showing mercy. It is rehearsing. Later that afternoon, you see ash piled on rooftops like snowdrifts. Men climb up with brooms to push it off. Ash slides off the tiles in thick sheets, and it lands in the street with a soft collapse. The sound is satisfying, like cleaning. But the ash does not leave the town. It just moves from roof to road, from road to gutter, from gutter to river. You watch a broom push gray powder into a drain, and you picture it upstream. One more scoop for the valley. One more ingredient for a mud flow. A boy below holds a sack open to catch the ash. His father tells him it might sell. For soap making, for fertilizer, for something. Humans love the idea that disaster can be repurposed. You keep walking because you can feel the mountain's schedule tightening. The air has that pre-storm heaviness, except there is no storm. There is only ash and the uncomfortable calm of a system inhaling. Near the waterfront, you find a line of people staring out at the ships, not boarding, not leaving, just looking. It is the way you stare at a closed door during a fire. You tell yourself you are noting options. Really, you are making peace with the fact that options can vanish quickly. The harbor official walks past with a handkerchief over his mouth. His handkerchief is already gray at the edges. He speaks to a captain in a low voice, and you catch a few words. Wait. Orders. Do not cause panic. The captain's jaw tightens, and he looks up toward Pelée like he is negotiating with a god. Geology does not negotiate. It just keeps loading the chamber. By late afternoon, the tremor changes. It is still there, still steady, but it deepens. It goes from background vibration to a bass note you feel in ribs. The windows in a nearby cafe buzz lightly, as if insects are trapped inside. People stop mid-sentence again, and this time they do not resume quickly. They listen. They wait for the vibration to end. It does not. Congratulations, you are learning what helplessness sounds like when it becomes continuous. You climb to another high street because watching is all you have left. The mountain is mostly hidden, but the plume is thicker, darker at the base. It rises, then flattens into a broad bruise across the sky. Every so often, the bruise flickers with tiny lightning. The cloud is charging itself with friction, like static on a blanket. Only the blanket is made of pulverized mountain. You feel ash settle on your eyelids again. You blink, and it grinds. The town below keeps making small, normal noises. A cart, a shout, a bell from the harbor. Those sounds feel thin now, like they are being played in a different room, because over them, under them, is the low, unending note from the volcano. You try to picture the inside of Pelée, the way you picture a ship engine room. Tight spaces, heat, pressure, valves that matter. But a volcano does not have a chief engineer. It has chemistry and gravity and rock that breaks where it is weakest. The dome up there is not just a pile of lava. It is a plug made of stiff, silica-rich magma. Silica makes magma cling to itself, like thick dough. Gas can get trapped in it, like bubbles in bread. The bubbles want to expand as pressure drops, but the plug resists, so the system does what trapped systems do. It searches for an exit that is not the main exit. It pressurizes cracks. It forces gas into fractures. It pries at weak seams. And on a steep volcano above a coastal city, the fastest exit is often downhill. You head back to your room before dark because you do not want to be in the street when confusion turns into movement. The ash makes the cobblestones slick in a strange way. Dry powder over damp stone, like ball bearings. Your boot slips once and you catch yourself on a wall. The wall feels gritty and warm from the day. You keep your hand there a moment longer than you need. You are grounding yourself like you can borrow stability from masonry. The tremor keeps going through the night, not always the same intensity, but always present. It is the volcano talking in a monotone. Somewhere after midnight, a deep boom rolls across the town. It is not the sharp crack of a steam blast. It is heavier, like a distant cannon. A second boom follows, then a third, irregularly spaced. Dogs start barking again, and this time, they do not stop quickly. You go to the window and open the shutters a careful amount. The air outside is thick, and the street lamp halo is small. Ash drifts through it in slow spirals. Then you see people moving, not running, not stampeding, just stepping into the street in night clothes. They look uphill and they look toward the harbor, and they do not know which direction is safer. That is the cruel part. When danger is complex, instinct is unreliable. A man calls out that the mountain is glowing. You squint through the ash haze, and for a second, you see it. A dull redness behind the cloud, like a furnace door not fully closed. It pulses, then fades. The dome is hot. The dome is growing, or the dome is collapsing in small incandescent chunks, feeding debris into gullies. Any of those options are bad. One of them is a countdown. Toward dawn, rain starts again. Light at first, it beads on ash and turns it into paste in minutes. You hear gutters begin to run, then choke. Water finds the easiest path, and in a town coated in ash, the easiest path changes. Instead of neat drainage, you get gray rivulets across streets. They carry grit, and they leave thin fan-shaped deposits at corners. You step outside and see the ash on roofs sagging, darker now with moisture. Wet ash is heavy. It is not just dust anymore. It is weight. A roof is designed for rain, not for rain plus powdered rock. Somewhere nearby you hear a sharp crack, then a crash. A small outbuilding roof gives up and folds inward. No one screams, which is the strangest part. Everyone just looks, because the collapse makes sense in a way nothing else does. If you put too much weight on a thing, it breaks. People understand that. They do not understand that the mountain is doing the same math to the air. The morning after the rain feels wrong from the first breath. The air is warmer than it should be. Not tropical warmth, but a faint baked warmth, like a kitchen after the oven has been open. Ash is still falling, but finer now, almost like smoke. It sticks to your wet skin and makes little gray freckles on your wrists. You walk down to the Roxelane again. The river is higher and the sound is more violent. It is not a clean rush. It is a grinding, rolling, knocking sound. You lean over a bridge and watch the flow. It is thick as stew. It carries rocks that bump and spin and vanish. The surface is lumpy, like it cannot decide if it is liquid. This is a lahar in training. Not the full thing, but the behavior is there. Water plus ash plus debris equals a moving mass that obeys gravity like a commandment. A man beside you says the river smells like rotten eggs. He is nauseated. Sulfur compounds are getting into water. Gas is finding paths into groundwater, and groundwater is delivering it to town. The mountain is not just above you. It is in your pipes now. The same man says people up valley are leaving, not because officials told them, because they heard the plantation story and they understood the translation. If a valley can kill workers in the dark, it can kill a city in the day. You walk back through town and notice more shuttered windows, more carts loaded with bedding, more bundles tied with rope. People are not calling it evacuation. They are calling it visiting family. They are calling it a short trip. They are calling it anything that lets them keep dignity while they retreat. At the harbor, a few small boats are being provisioned. You watch a woman hand a bag of bread to a fisherman. Her hands shake slightly, even as she tries to smile. The fisherman keeps his eyes on the bag, not on her face, because if he looks at her face, he might admit the truth. That truth is that boats have limits. Space runs out, weather changes, and when panic hits a dock, the sea does not become a solution. It becomes another hazard. By afternoon, the ash fall eases briefly. That is not relief. It is suspense. The sky lightens enough to show the outline of Pelée again. For the first time in days, you see the upper slope clearly. It looks scarred, streaked with fresh deposits, like someone poured gray paint down the gullies. Near the summit, the dome stands out as a dark, jagged mass. It is larger than before, more prominent, like a growth. It is not symmetrical. It looks like a broken tower that someone tried to stack quickly. You stare at it until your eyes water, because your body is begging you to do something other than stare. But there is nothing else to do that does not involve leaving. And leaving means choosing a direction with incomplete information. The harbor is an option, but boats are controlled by men with orders. The road south is an option, but roads are being undermined by mud and ash. Higher ground is an option, except higher ground is closer to the machine. Congratulations, you are trapped in the geometry of a volcano. Late that afternoon, another sound carries down from the mountain, a long roaring hiss, like steam released from a boiler. It lasts longer than the earlier booms. Then it stops, and the silence after it feels wrong, like your ears are missing a limb. A few seconds later, ash begins to fall again, but this time it is mixed with small gritty pellets. Not rain, not hail, tiny bits of rock and pumice tapping on rooftops and leaves. People look up and flinch as the pellets hit skin. It is not painful, but it is rude. The mountain is throwing gravel at you. That evening, the authorities put out another notice. It says the danger is exaggerated. It says St. Pierre is safe. It says do not leave, because leaving could cause disorder, and you watch people read it with a strange expression. Not belief, not outright rejection, a kind of exhausted bargaining. Because leaving is hard. Leaving means admitting you might lose your home. It means admitting the mountain has more authority than government. And no one likes to say that out loud. You spend the night near the harbor, closer to the water and the ships. You sit on a low wall and listen to the sounds. Ropes creak, water laps. A distant cough echoes from a street behind you, and far above all of it, the mountain continues its low machinery. Around you, others do the same thing. They linger near the sea, in clusters, talking softly. They are not sleeping well either. The next morning arrives warm and strangely quiet. The ash plume is there, but it looks heavier, more cohesive. It rises in a thick column, then spreads into a dark ceiling that seems lower than the day before. The light is dim, even though the sun is up. It feels like morning under a blanket. The sea is calm, almost smug. You could mistake it for a peaceful day if you had not been paying attention. The quiet is what unsettles you most. The booms have paused. The pellets have stopped. The tremor is still there, but it feels muted. This is the kind of calm that makes humans relax. It is also the kind of calm that can happen right before a system fails, because pressure does not always advertise itself with noise. Sometimes it reaches a threshold, and then, suddenly, there is release. In the town, people begin to move, as if the lull means improvement. Market stalls reopen. A few children play again. A priest holds a service, and the church fills with people who want to be reassured by ritual. You stand outside for a moment and listen to singing. The voices are thin through ash-heavy air, but they are steady. It is beautiful, in a desperate way. And you cannot stop thinking about how quickly sound can end. Mid-morning, you walk toward the edge of town again, toward the valley mouths. You want one more look at the channels, one more reading of the report card. The roxylane is still thick, still loaded. The banks are eaten away, and new deposits have narrowed parts of the channel. A narrowed channel means higher flow, faster flow, and more destructive energy. You watch it for a long minute, and then you notice something else. The smell is stronger today. Sulfur, yes, but also something sharp, almost like bleach. Volcanic gases mixing in air can make strange chemical edges. It pricks your throat and makes your eyes sting harder. You pull cloth over your mouth, and the cloth tastes like ash. Immediately, up valley, the cloud over Pelée thickens again. It is not moving like a normal weather cloud. It bulges, it swells, it pulses at the base. You feel a subtle shift in wind direction. The trade wind hesitates, then weakens. That matters. Wind is a conveyor belt for ash and gas. A weak wind means the plume rises and hangs. It means air near the ground can become more stagnant. It means whatever comes out might not be pushed away politely. It might settle into the town like a lid. Around noon, you hear a low rumble, deeper than thunder, and it rolls for a long time. People stop and look up. Some point, some laugh nervously. A few hurry indoors, as if walls can negotiate with the sky. You feel the rumble in your stomach, like hunger, except it is not hunger. It is your body reacting to something large, moving. The rumble fades, and then the quiet returns. For a moment, nothing happens. And then, from the mountain, the plume suddenly darkens at the base. It thickens, rapidly, like ink dropped into water. The top of the plume mushrooms outward, not a tall, clean column like a distant volcano postcard. This is heavier, denser, loaded with ash. It pushes upward and then begins to sag. You watch and your brain tries to label it eruption. But the label is too simple, because what matters is not just that material is coming out. It is how it behaves once it comes out. A dome-plugged system can fail in a way that does not look dramatic from far away. The failure can be lateral. The pressure can break the side of the dome or the crater wall, and the eruption can pour out like a spill. Not lava, a pyroclastic density current, a ground-hugging mixture of hot gas, ash, and rock fragments. It moves like an avalanche, but it is also a blast furnace. It does not rise, it pours. It does not float away, it hugs the land. It follows valleys because valleys are funnels, and St. Pierre sits at the end of those funnels like a cup waiting to be filled. You feel the air change before you see anything obvious. It gets warmer, Not from sun. A hot breath seems to slide down from uphill, subtle at first, like opening an oven door across the room. Then you hear a sound that is not thunder, not a boom, a roar, sudden and enormous, like the sky tearing open. People scream, not all at once, but in overlapping bursts, like a chorus finding its note. You look up the valley, and you see a dark mass moving low, fast. It is not a cloud in the sky. It is a cloud on the ground. It pours over ridges and through ravines, hugging the slopes, accelerating. It has texture, rolling lobes, like boiling smoke, but it moves with purpose, guided by the shape of land. The front edge looks almost fluid, spilling forward, filling space. This is not something you can outrun. This is not even something you can properly process in time. Your brain tries to decide what to do, and your body decides first. You turn toward the harbor because open space feels like escape. The streets become corridors, and corridors become traps. The hot wind increases, and ash fills your mouth even through cloth. You see people running, stumbling on slick ash. A cart overturns at a corner, and a horse screams, high and thin. The scream ends abruptly as the air grows hotter. The pyroclastic current is coming with its own wind. It pushes air ahead of it like a plow. That wind slams into the town first, a blast that hits doors and shutters. Windows shatter. You feel it push against your chest like a hand. Then the darkness arrives, faster than your legs. The leading edge of the flow enters the outskirts like a living thing. It floods the streets, wraps around buildings, pours through alleys. You cannot see its source anymore. You only see the effect. Ash and gas moving as one body, dense enough to knock you down, hot enough to ignite fabric. Breathing becomes impossible, not because there is no air, but because the air is wrong. It is superheated. It is loaded with fine ash that scours the throat. It carries toxic gases that do not need much time to do their work. You inhale reflexively, and it feels like swallowing flame and glass together. Your lungs protest immediately, spasming. You try to cough, and the cough brings in more heat. Congratulations, your own biology has become a liability. You stagger, blinded, and your eyes flood with tears that instantly feel hot and gritty. The street under your feet is gone under ash and debris. You cannot find traction. The air roars so loud you cannot hear individual screams anymore. It becomes one continuous sound, like a train passing through the town. You reach toward a wall because you need something solid, anything. The wall is hot to the touch. Paint blisters, wood shutters ignite. Cloth catches fire on bodies that are still trying to run. The flow is not a single wave that passes cleanly. It surges, it pulses, it eddies around obstacles. It finds every opening, every alley, every doorway not sealed. It climbs stairs, it drops into courtyards, it pours into basements. You think the thick stone of a building is an argument. You think a wall is a boundary. Wrong. It is only a delay. The current comes with heat that moves faster than flame. It is not burning you like a campfire. It is cooking you like an oven you cannot step away from. Air becomes a weapon because it is no longer just air. It is hot gas carrying ash so fine It behaves like liquid. It pours into rooms, then swirls, then settles, then surges again. You feel it wrap around corners as if it has hands. You try to keep low because you have heard smoke rises. But this is not smoke. This is density. This is a ground-hugging hurricane that prefers the floor. It rolls through streets in thick lobes like ink flooding paper. You catch a glimpse of the harbor through a break between buildings. For one stupid, hopeful second, water looks like escape. Then the heat hits the waterfront and the hope evaporates. Wooden piers flash into flame. Ropes snap tight, then sag, then burn through. Canvas on boats shrivels as if it is ashamed. The masts of ships become black lines in a world turning charcoal. The current does not stop at the edge of the sea. It runs over the last flat distance like it is smoothing a bed. It spills onto the waterfront, and the water answers with steam. Ships at anchor rock violently as hot wind slams them. Some catch fire from drifting embers, and some from pure radiant heat. You hear the sound of metal complaining. It is a high, strained squeal, like a hinge being forced. Barrels in the port explode as heat expands trapped air. You see one roll, unattended, then stop against a wall that is already crumbling. The roar becomes total. It fills your skull, and it steals the small sounds you use to measure reality. There is no longer a town soundscape. There is only the sound of a fast-moving atmosphere shredding a city. You try to move, but moving means breathing harder, and breathing harder means taking in more of what is killing you. Your lungs clamp down, and your body does something ancient and stupid. It tries to flee. Your legs push. Your arms reach. Your eyes squeeze shut against grit. Every instinct you have was built for predators with teeth. This predator is temperature, and it has no face. Somewhere nearby, glass shatters in a chain reaction. Not one window, many. The pressure wave ahead of the current has already punched the town. Now the current itself finishes the job. It strips shutters from hinges. It slams doors inward. It topples chimneys as if they are made of chalk. And then, very quickly, the streets begin to look unfamiliar. Not because they change shape, because they fill. Ash accumulates in drifts, then in mounds, then in a continuous layer. It is like being inside a snowstorm. If the snow is hot and sharp, you try to get to the seawall because you need a landmark. But landmarks are disappearing. The air is so thick with ash that distance collapses. A building 10 paces away is a silhouette. A person 2 paces away is a blur. You reach a corner, and the wind makes a hard turn with you. The current uses the street grid like plumbing. It accelerates through narrow alleys, and it slows in open squares, then swirls back. It is not one clean blast. It is a series of surges, like a giant coughing. Each surge brings a new breath of heat and a new load of grit. You taste something bitter and chemical behind the ash. Sulfur, yes, but also acids forming in the wet places of your mouth and throat. Volcanic gas meets moisture, and your body provides the moisture. Congratulations, your saliva has become part of the chemistry experiment. You bump into something soft, and it does not move. You do not look down. Looking down would make it real. You keep one hand on a wall because the world is now a spinning gray room. The wall is rough with ash and hot enough to sting. Your fingertips come away dirty and slightly numb. You realize the heat is not only in the air, it is soaking into stone. It is penetrating the town the way sunlight warms a courtyard. Only this warmth is lethal, and it arrives in seconds. Somewhere, a bell rings once, then stops. Not because someone decided to stop ringing it, because the person ended, or the rope burned, or the tower shifted. All of the above is possible. Everything is possible now, and none of it is good. The current presses on. It does not linger out of cruelty. It lingers because the terrain holds it. St. Pierre sits at the end of funnels, so the flow pools and eddies and keeps delivering heat into the same streets. You feel the wind drop for a heartbeat, and the silence is worse. In that tiny pause, you can hear fire catching. You can hear wood crack as moisture inside it flashes into steam. You can hear something large collapse, a heavy whomp, then a cascade of smaller debris. Then the next surge arrives, and all those sounds are swallowed again. Your eyes open for a moment, and you see the harbor as a smear of orange. It is not a clean flame line. It is scattered ignition, like a map of accidental torches. A ship closer to shore is fully involved, flames climbing rigging like vines. Another ship farther out has smoke pouring from its deck, and men moving like shadows. They are trying to cut anchor lines. They are trying to do anything with muscles and rope, but the air is still raw out there. The hot ash blast does not politely end at the shoreline. It skims the water surface, and the water steams, and the air above it becomes a hot fog. Even if a boat moves, it moves through a furnace, and the harbor, normally a vent for the town, has become a bowl. Heat and ash settle here, trapped between sea and slope. You try to inhale again, a small, cautious breath. It does not work. Your throat seizes, and your lungs refuse the exchange. Your body wants oxygen. The air offers heat and particles and poison. So your body panics harder, and that makes the exchange worse. This is how a pyroclastic current kills efficiently. It does not need to bury you. It only needs to turn your next breath into a mistake. You find yourself pressed into a doorway without remembering choosing it. A stone threshold under your knees, a wall at your shoulder, a dark interior that is slightly less hot. For the moment, inside, the air is still thick, but there is less wind. Less wind means less fresh heat delivered. For a few seconds, that difference feels like mercy. It is not mercy. It is geometry. A pocket formed by accident, not intention. You stay there because movement is pain, because the outside roar is too big to argue with, because your mind is narrowing to a single animal thought. Wait, then another thought arrives, sharp enough to cut through the haze. This is why almost no one survives. You do not get to choose a smart shelter. You only get to be where the flow is thinner or where a wall blocks the blast. It is luck disguised as architecture. The next surge hits the building exterior and the doorway becomes a vent. Hot ash pushes into the room in a low, fast roll, like fog with weight. It floods across the floor first. Then it rises. Your ankles disappear in gray. Then your shins. It is not deep yet, but it is constant, and it is hot enough to make your skin feel tight. You tuck your face into your arm, trying to filter. Your sleeve becomes a useless rag. Ash penetrates fabric like water through gauze. The world turns into heat, grit, and the taste of metal. Time stops behaving like time. Seconds stretch. Then hours vanish. Then seconds return. Your brain cannot build a timeline when the senses are being overloaded. Outside, the roar begins to taper, not because the disaster is done, because the leading surge has passed, and the pooled flow is starting to thin. The wind drops another notch. You can hear the crackle of burning wood more clearly now. You can hear a ship horn in the harbor. One long-drawn sound that ends in a wet gurgle. Maybe the crew collapsed. Maybe the ship is already sinking, burned and holed. Maybe the horn line melted or the steam pressure failed. Whatever the reason, the sound feels like the last normal noise. You lift your head slightly and your eyelids feel glued. Ash has caked at the corners. Your eyes water and the tears run gray. You cough and it feels like coughing through sand. The cough brings up nothing because there is nothing to clear. It is all inside you now, a film of grit on wet tissue. You force yourself toward the street again because staying inside means fire will find you. Buildings are igniting in patches. A curtain here, a roof beam there. Fire is starting in 100 small places, helped by heat that preheated the whole town. This is not a single blaze you can avoid. This is ignition as a general condition. You stumble out and the light shocks you. Not bright light, a flat gray daylight filtered through ash with orange flicker underneath. The street is unrecognizable. Ash covers everything like a heavy frost. Debris is scattered, shutters, roof tiles, splintered wood. A cart lies on its side, wheels still turning slowly, as if confused. The air is still hot, but it is breathable in a limited, punishing way. Each breath hurts, but it does not instantly end you. That tells you the main density current has moved on. Or, more accurately, it is thinned enough to stop being a wall. You look uphill and you cannot see the mountain. You only see a dark, overhanging cloud that seems to press down on the town. The cloud is not drifting away. It is settling. Ash is falling out of it steadily, as if the sky is shedding. You look toward the harbor again, and you see fire on the water. Not just on ships, on the surface itself, in patches where burning cargo and fuel spread. The port is a collection of torches. Some ships have snapped mooring lines and drift half burning. Some are stuck against the quay, cooking. You hear shouting from the water, faint and hoarse. Then you hear no shouting, just the crackle and the hiss of steam. You move, not with a goal, but with the need to keep moving. Your feet sink into ash with each step, soft and deep enough to steal energy. The ash is warm underfoot. In places, it is hot enough to sting through soles. You learn quickly to step where debris lies, because debris is cooler than fresh ash. That is a sentence you never expect to be true. You pass a doorway where a stone wall still stands, but everything behind it is black. You glance inside, and the air shimmers with heat. No movement, no sound. You keep going, because stopping invites the reality to catch up. The town has been erased, but not flattened neatly. Some walls remain standing, stubborn and skeletal. A facade with no roof, a chimney with no house, a church wall with scorch marks where prayer used to live. The pattern of destruction is not artistic. It is physics. Wind channels, heat pools, edges burn faster. Interiors become ovens. You step over a threshold and realize it is the threshold of a shop you visited days ago. The counter is gone. The shelves are gone. Only the stone outline remains, and ash inside like gray carpet. You try to orient by the slope of streets, by the feel of the sea breeze, but the sea breeze is gone. The air is stagnant, heavy with ash and smoke. The usual cooling breath from the water has been replaced by hot drafts from fires. Your sense of direction becomes primitive. Up is danger. Down is water. But down is also burning ships and scalding steam. You choose a street that you think leads to open space. Every decision feels like gambling with a loaded deck. You find bodies, not in piles at first, just one, then another. Some lie as if they sat down, then stopped. Some are collapsed in doorways. Some are in the street, twisted as if mid-step. There is no blood. There is ash. There is burn. And there is stillness. This is the particular horror of pyroclastic death. It is fast enough that people do not always have time for drama. They simply end where they were when the air became impossible. You keep your eyes moving because looking too long is a trap. If you fully understand what you are seeing, you might stop walking. And stopping walking is how you become part of the landscape. By late afternoon, the ashfall continues, and the light remains dim. You realize the day is not progressing normally. The sun is behind the ash cloud, and the cloud is thick enough to make time feel stuck. The town exists in a permanent, dirty twilight. You hear a new sound from the sea. Oars. A boat approaching cautiously, the rhythm slow, careful. Rescue comes by water first, because roads are blocked and valleys are still dangerous. A small vessel edges into the harbor, and men on board cover their faces with cloth. They look at the shoreline and hesitate. They have come expecting a disaster, but the scale still shocks them. They call out. No answer. They call again, louder. A faint response comes from somewhere inland. A hoarse, human sound. You want to answer, but your throat is raw. You force a shout anyway, and it comes out like a rasp. The men in the boat look toward you, then toward the fires, then back. They are doing the calculation. Can we land without dying? Can we stay without being trapped if the volcano does it again? Because yes, it can do it again. This is not over in a human sense. The mountain has not promised anything. The boat lands briefly and a man jumps onto the quay. He runs a few steps, then stops, coughing hard. He leans over, hands on knees, and spits gray. He tries again, moving in short bursts. This is what rescue looks like in volcanic aftermath, not heroic charges. Short, careful trips into an environment that is still actively hostile. You meet him halfway, and he stares at your ash-caked clothes, your burned cuffs. He asks, how many are alive? You look around at the silent streets and the standing walls. You do not have a number. You have an absence. You tell him, very softly, almost apologetically, that almost none are. His face tightens and he looks away. He knew, but hearing it makes it real. He gestures toward the boat, and you understand the instruction. Leave now while you can still walk, because staying is not bravery, it is exposure. You move toward the water, step by step, ash dragging at your feet. You pass more still forms. You pass a courtyard where a tree still stands, leaves burned off, branches black like wire. You pass a fountain that is dry, basin filled with ash, as if the town's water has been replaced. You reach the quay, and the heat from burning ships is intense. The boat rocks gently, a normal motion in an abnormal place. You step in, and your legs almost collapse with relief. The men push off quickly, because the harbor is still dangerous. Burning debris floats. Water is hot in patches. Smoke and ash drift low. As you row out, you look back. St. Pierre is a silhouette of standing walls and fire pockets. The mountain behind it is invisible, but its cloud is everywhere. The cloud extends over the sea like a lid. Ash continues to fall, even out here. The island has not finished shedding. The men in the boat steer along the coast, searching for other survivors. They call out toward the shoreline. Sometimes there is no answer. Sometimes there is a faint movement. Someone stumbling. Someone waving weakly. Each time, the boat must decide whether to risk landing, because the shoreline is lined with debris, and the air near land is hotter, and the volcano could send another surge at any moment. That is the new rule. Every minute is borrowed. As you drift, you see ships farther out that have survived, their hulls dark. Some have scorched sails hanging like torn cloth. Some have men on deck staring toward the town, too stunned to speak. A few are moving away under minimal power, choosing distance over duty. You do not judge them. You understand the instinct to put water between yourself and a mountain that breathes sideways. Later, as the day finally begins to dim into real evening, more boats arrive. Rescue attempts multiply, cautious and fragmented. Men shout orders. Lanterns appear, dim points in smoky air. The sea becomes the staging ground because the land is still too hot and too uncertain. On shore, fires continue to burn through the night. Not a single sweeping inferno, but hundreds of small ones. They find what the blast weakened. They consume what the ash did not bury. And above it all, the ash cloud continues to hang. The next morning, you return to shore with a small group. Not into the center, not yet. You step onto ash that has cooled slightly, but still holds warmth beneath. It is like walking on a giant hearth after the fire has died down. The air is still toxic in a quiet way. Not instantly lethal now, but punishing. You keep cloth over your mouth, and you still taste grit. Every step kicks up fine ash that rises like smoke, then settles again. It is impossible to stay clean. Impossible to breathe without taking the town inside you. You walk through streets that have become trenches. Ash has piled along walls, drifted against corners. In places, it reaches your knees. In other places, wind has scoured it thinner, revealing cobblestones again. The pattern is irregular, like snow after a storm, except it is gray and dead. You find a building with thick stone walls still mostly intact. Inside, the air is cooler. Cooler means survivable. You call out, and you hear a faint response. A human voice, cracked and weak. You follow it, and you find someone in a back room, half buried in ash, eyes wide. They are alive by accident. A pocket of space, a wall that blocked the worst blast, a doorway that faced the wrong way for the flow. They look at you like you are a ghost. You look at them like they are a miracle, and neither of you finds comfort in it, because miracles this small do not undo a city erased. You help them out slowly because their skin is burned in patches. Their breathing is shallow and painful. They keep coughing, and every cough produces gray. You give them water and they swallow with difficulty. The water turns gritty immediately in their mouth because ash is everywhere. As you move through the town over the next hours, you find the same pattern. Almost no one. A few who were in the strongest buildings. A few who were in cells, thick, walled, low air movement. A few who happened to be in places where the flow thinned. Survival has no moral logic here. Only physics. A wall thickness. A doorway angle. A few seconds of timing. Rescuers begin marking buildings, searching quickly, then moving on. Not because they do not care, because staying too long in any one spot risks the next hazard. There are still hot pockets under ash. Step wrong and your foot punches through into heat and you get burned. Some roofs that survived the blast now collapse under ash load and fire damage. A wall that looks stable can suddenly give and bury you in hot powder